Welcome back to the show, everybody. This week we got a special topic that we want to get into that we feel like will be extremely valuable for you, not only you, but your family as well. We want to get into trust, revocable trust, irrevocable trust, things of that nature. Having a trust can be important and valuable for several reasons, especially in terms of estate planning and even asset protection.
You practiced that, didn't you?
No, this guy's right.
No, you practiced that.
A little bit.
That was a little bit of the mirror.
Just a little bit, yeah. And we want to get into why it's important for you, why you absolutely need it. I mean, you're clearly tuning into a financial literacy podcast. You're hoping to grow your wealth over time. And as time goes on, you absolutely will need this to protect yourself and your family.
All right. So for context, I think it's important to really kind of dive down into why we feel like speaking on this topic is relevant to you. It is not naturally what I would call a financial vehicle to most. It's an asset protection vehicle, which does have its arm in the context of financial wealth building.
Right.
So as underwriters, me formerly, Said currently by trade, we see a lot of wealthy people's financials. And one of the recurring themes that we started to see over time was there was a consistent trend of people having trust. As a matter of fact, you probably heard that one of the most common assets or vehicles for people to hold their assets in real estate world are in our LLCs, because you have a passive income benefit and you can write down certain things that really benefit you. So LLCs are the most common vehicle to hold investment real estate across the country. Trusts are how people hold their interest in the LLC.
Exactly. So if the LLC owns, let's just say, we'll use a real estate property as the asset tool. In this example, the LLC owns the property outright 100%. Your trust, your family trust, or your living trust will own 100% of that LLC. So they start to layer it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give you some of the benefits of these things, and we're going to explain to you some of the nuances that we've seen over time. But I must tell you, caveat here, I am a licensed and practicing attorney. This is not legal advice. You seek counsel for your own legal needs. But I am going to give you some general theoretical legal advice, which may or may not pertain to you.
Right. This was definitely one of those things for me, like you mentioned earlier, that as an underwriter over the years, we see the formula, part of the formula of how, the rich become wealthy and
right.
they, maintain their wealth and establish their wealth. And this is one of those recurring themes that I would constantly see, that every single person would have a trust, a family trust, a living trust, that they would typically hold some, if not all, of their assets in.
So let's walk through the lifeline of some terminology and explain to you some of the differences of things you're probably going to hear. Mm-hmm. Typically speaking, most people during their lifetime create a trust that is built for their lifetime, or inter vivos, during their lifetime, right? There's some Latin language here. It's from law school. It's an old habit for me to get rid of. Just know it's a trust that you create as a vehicle in your lifetime. That is generally revocable, meaning that if you say, hey, I have the Said family trust, but I want to make changes to it, you can change anything you want during your lifetime. Mm-hmm. Upon your death, if you were the only person who made the trust, it then becomes irrevocable, meaning that you cannot change what has been put in place by you.
Yeah, it shifts over, right?
It shifts over.
From being revocable to irrevocable. Now, if you get, let's say you get a trust, because there's all kinds of places now where you can get trust, right? If you go to a good attorney that specializes in this, right, they're going to ask you a series of questions, some of them that you've never thought of or never thought you needed to think about, mm-hmm. right, that you start to plan. And then a really good one will allow you to come back and check in every few years or every so often to now update this revocable trust.
Yeah, and it is kind of a money grab in some cases by attorneys. Let's be honest about that. In other cases, it's technology's been displacing this need for a long time. Mm-hmm. I really like Sal from Mind Pump's cousin's program, GetDynasty.com, where he does this for you and has a follow-up built up into it. It's actually kind of fantastic for getting started. The cost is relatively innocuous compared to some of the legal costs I've seen from traditional attorneys, but the main thing you need to do if you go through this process, whether you're using something like Get Dynasty or you're going to an attorney or you're doing it yourself on LegalZoom, which I do not advise, you need to be able to ask yourself the hard questions. And a great example is, Said, what's going to happen to your kids if you die?
Yeah, and that really, and you can imagine how this answer will change over the years as they continue to get older.
It does,
right?
Yeah.
So right now, if something were to happen to me, I would need to make sure I need to figure out who's going to take guardianship over them, right? Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, let's just say I need to update it. Now they're 18 years old, but I know they're actually not financially literate yet. um, I need to protect the assets from them to make sure that they don't run the whole empire down to the ground, right? So, and as time goes on, you can continue to modify these things.
So I will point out there are special and unique trusts that are out there. You can hear about them: Delaware Statutory Trust, all sorts of unique variations like that. I'm not going to get into the nuances of each one, but suffice it to say that those are wrong for about 99.9% of people.
Absolutely.
If you have a tax need or somebody from an estate planning purpose that really tells you that you need a certain trust and tells you the benefits, that's a different story. But for most of America, just creating a simple living trust that you can change during your lifetime will help you do things like avoid probate.
Yes, and
So
this is massive.
yeah,
right?
Probate has tax consequences.
A lot of tax consequences, and it really holds the assets that, let's just say, if I were to pass away at some point in time in the future, and I have assets that I want to pass down to my kids, and I don't have a trust, and now these assets need to go through probate. It takes on average 18 months for those assets to transfer over to my kids because it goes into this whole probate process.
The probate process is basically a court getting involved.
Yeah.
A judge going, okay, Saeed passed. He has X, Y, and Z assets. He did not leave a will or a living trust. And in doing so, we're going to decide where his money goes and to whom.
They need it. So what happens is, let's say I have several investment properties, right? By that time, hopefully, right? That's the goal. They contact all the creditors and they let them know that I passed away, and they need to make sure that all the debts are paid.
Well, they're going to name a trustee who does that on their behalf.
Right, on their behalf.
To settle the estate.
Yeah, but you can imagine it's being handled by the court, and how many people are passing away, how many assets are going through probate. That's why this process takes a long time. So they want to make sure all your taxes are paid. They want to make sure that all debts are paid off, right? So that's why they say typically on average 18 months for it to eventually get to my heirs, as they call it.
So let's define some terms here. If I create a trust, I am the trustor. Right?
Yes.
I created the trust. My wife and I create a trust. We are both trustors. If we are in control of the trust, like during our lifetime, we are also both the trustees.
Yes.
We have a fiduciary responsibility to the trust to preserve its assets as trustees. In 99% of the cases, for people who are doing this for their trust, for their living trust, myself and my wife are going to create trust as trustors, and we're also going to be the trustees. However, you can name trustees that move into place upon your death. And most trusts do this, right? So in the event that I die, I would like Saeed to be my trustee. So my wife and I would name Saeed as trustee in the event of our death. And then instead of the court naming somebody to handle the estate, Saeed would then step in and handle the estate.
And I would handle the estate, and I would follow the trust to the T. So I would make sure that everything gets handled exactly the way Chris and Joanna had written out exactly how they wanted it to get handled, right?
So I think the ownership of trust, generally speaking, has the logical fallacy of privacy. Unfortunately, for most people, they do the same reoccurring thing. And a lot of attorneys encourage this, and I never truly understood why.
Interesting.
They'll say, hey, Saeed, name your trust the Saeed Omar Living Trust. Or the Omar Family Living Trust.
You know, when I get a trust, it's gonna be something fly. It can't just be the Saeed Omar or the Omar Family Trust.
Kobe Day Forever Trust.
Come on, all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
But that
THS.
goes. Yeah, well, so my family trust is actually the CMN Family Trust.
Okay.
Right, my initials, and I had this before I got married. So one of the things to think about is this is a great example of it. I had the CMN, my initials, Family Trust, and I chose that name specifically because it didn't have my last name in it.
Yes.
Which I'm doing no service to right now to protect privacy.
Right.
And the reason why I chose that name is it was ambiguous enough, but still close enough to where I felt like that was a good name. But you can name it anything you want. Most people just choose their family name because it's a family trust. That being said, I've got married. I've got two choices at that point in time. I could amend my trust, right? So I could have the CMN Family Trust dated, the date that I created it, amended on whatever date I amended it.
Right.
So you often see this language in reference to trust. So if I didn't amend it, CMN Family Trust created on January 1 of 2023. But let's say I got married in February. CMN Family Trust amended in February.
Right.
Right? Or I can do something known as a complete restatement. right?
Yes.
So let's just say, you know what? The trust was good for what I needed it for, but now I'm married. Now there's more complexities. We've got a son. Rather than try to amend this, we're just going to completely restate the entire trust.
Right.
So that'll be the CMN Family Trust restated, and then the date.
And one thing to really keep in mind here is by doing something like this, you're being proactive, right? Yes, Chris mentioned that it is a money grab by, attorneys out there. But really
A
you're
really
saving
good attorney, it's not a money grab. Just keep in mind, you don't if nothing changed, tangibly in the year,
Mhm.
then you don't have to go in and talk to your attorney.
Right. Exactly. But definitely you're saving a lot. You're saving, the people that the assets are being transferred over to, you're saving them a lot of money, on the back end because of, estate planning and you don't have to pay the capital gains taxes, right?
Yeah, well, as you get older, one of the things you'll find that really helps avoid tax liability is actually passing these assets on to your children during your lifetime
Mhm.
vis-a-vis the trust.
Yeah.
And there's a couple benefits here that people don't think about from just a human perspective. Number one, you get to see your kids enjoy the monetary benefit during your lifetime. Okay. Number two, there's a tax benefit to them getting it during their lifetime, and you can help them with the taxes. So upon your death, they're not just getting hit with this whirlwind of emotions. Obviously, you're gone.
Right.
And oh, by the way, I've got to deal with these financial consequences as a result of it. And I'm changing my life by adding X, Y, and Z elements to it as per your trust.
Right.
So it's a lot more humane. I hate to describe it that way. If you start passing assets along before you actually die. But there's a lot more that goes into trust people don't think about. I mean, keep in mind, there's an asset protection here. Your trust is a separate entity than you.
It has its own social security number, a tax ID number.
Well, most people will actually attach it to their own tax ID number.
Right, but it could.
You
right?
can get a separate tax ID number from the government and
Right.
treat it as a separate vehicle. Most people don't want to do that because they don't want to file a separate tax return for their trust. So they file it as a statement attached to their current tax return as a family trust.
Exactly.
And, for tax purposes, that's fine. You also insulate yourself because a trust is treated separately. So you still get the same benefit, even though it shows up on your tax return as just an extension of you. Very similar to an S Corp, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I think is really, really important here that I think people miss is that life happens fast, right? You set this up and you say, okay, I don't own anything besides my primary residence. Do I need this? Yes, you do.
Yes.
Okay. Chris, I don't own a primary residence. I just have a couple of bank accounts and I'm learning. I've got a kid. Do I need this? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, it's just me. I don't have any kids. I don't have any assets yet. I'm learning and growing. Do I need this? No, you don't absolutely need it. Is it a good practice to have it? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In the event that you die, do you really want the legislative system determining what happens? Do you really want your mom, your dad, your nephews, whoever's going to benefit from from your passing, whoever's going to be related to you to get that or has a claim to it?
Right.
Do you really want them to have to go through a separate process, or do you want to make it as streamlined as possible? People say, well, Chris, I'm young. I'm not going to die. My wife and I, to this day, still question whether we should fly on the same flight with that whenever our son's at home and we're going somewhere on our own. Because when you think about it, if that plane goes down, we're both gone.
I mean, no different than, the president, the vice president never can be on the same flight, or executives at
Exactly.
corporations,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
It's just redundancy. I would say a trust functions in much of the same way. It gives you the redundancy, the coverage that in worst case event scenario something happens. But people forget that life happens quickly.
Yep.
You could not own a piece of real estate, buy a piece of real estate, and not think about the trust.
It's easy to think, right? That everything's fine, but like we all know, it could all be taken away tomorrow. And in my opinion, what better thing to give? Let's just say your loved ones. Let's say you do have assets and you want to pass it on. What better thing to give them than like they now all of a sudden have all these assets that you've now given them, but have no idea how to control it. You can establish a property management company for them so they know who to go to. You can control the distribution of the assets. So like I think Shaq said something once that his kids aren't gonna get anything unless they get 2 degrees. Like you can go that far.
Shaq is a very underrated, intelligent entrepreneur.
Well, you know what makes him, I think, so intelligent is he knows when he needs to just listen and trust others and delegate the process.
I wish Arun was like that.
He is like that. What do you mean?
Ruben, welcome back to the show, brother.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a long time. We missed you, and I'm taking shots because I'm emotionally still reeling from your absence.
We have missed you a lot.
I apologize. Family stuff taken care of.
Yeah.
I thought we were family. Did I miss that part of the relationship?
No, we are family.
I feel like I didn't read the room right on that.
Odin's been taking care of some stuff, and maybe on a future episode we'll get into it. We'll leave it up to him.
Basically saying he doesn't want to hear about your shit right now.
No, it's not true. I didn't want to put him on the spot and be like, nah, I really don't want to share.
You just assume that he's not sharing?
No, I don't. What do you mean? I'm not assuming. I just don't want to force him.
All right. Well, before we leave the trust episode, or trust segment of this episode, I do want to cover a couple nuances that over the years I think are important for people to understand. If you're going to get a loan on your home, a lot of agency lenders, your Fannie, Freddies, if you're going to get a loan on your home, they'll tell you, hey, Chris, the property that you're buying has to go into your name, and then contemporaneous with closing, at the same time of closing your property, we'll also put it into your trust name, which then eliminates the privacy because someone can search title records and find your name, and then it's going into a trust, and they go, oh, well, Chris owns this trust because it went from him directly into this trust.
Yes.
Now they just search the trust name and they find all your properties. To avoid that, you can work with smaller lenders that'll go directly into the trust name, right? Or, frankly, you can try not to put certain properties into your trust when you want to keep them separate.
Yeah, I've heard that some lenders, if the property's held under a trust, they won't even give you like a HELOC.
Correct, yeah. It's bizarre. Well, HELOCs right now, they're just trying to find ways not to do them because they're really concerned about the housing market and valuations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it originally started with like, we're not going to go behind somebody else's first trust deed. So if Wells Fargo made the first trust deed, you had to go to Wells Fargo to get a second trust deed. What if Wells Fargo stopped making them?
Right.
Second trust deeds, which they did for a while. And I think they still haven't. But you got to kind of play that game a little bit. But there's some idiosyncrasies that are there. Once your trust goes from revocable, meaning that you can change at any point in time, to irrevocable, it becomes much more difficult for people to get loans associated with that type of ownership.
Yes.
And the reason why is that irrevocable trust is now an independent, kind of functioning entity, right? And it is functioning based on the testator, the person who died, the trustor's intentions. And now that person's gone, so that person can't change the intentions. So it's, generally speaking, you can't provide a guarantee as a beneficiary for an irrevocable trust to most lenders.
Right. And something else that I really want to make sure that I touch on before we move on is when I was doing my research on this topic, that just because you have a will does not mean it won't go into probate. Right. And not only that, I believe the will document will become a public document in that case.
Well, not only that, but a will is not the same thing, right?
Yes.
So you typically get a will and a living trust, but in my mind, a will just gives a directive, do X, Y, and Z. A living trust has more value.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of weird nuances to the difference, but suffice it to say, if you go to a good attorney or a good website, they'll give you a living trust and a will, a last will and testament.
Yeah.
Right? The living trust is by far the better vehicle. A will just says, hey, do X, Y, and Z. It's very delineated. It's very clear. It's kind of like just directions.
Right.
Whereas a living trust is like a roadmap. Rudimentary, but effectively speaking, anyone who gives you a living trust should be also throwing in a will as well.
Right. And one other added benefit that I did read about, because I know that the divorce rate in this country is very high.
What is it right now? You know?
I think it's over 50%.
California's got to be over like 77%, right?
It's got to be something crazy. I mean,
Maroon. You got to Google that. What's the divorce rate in California?
Yeah.
Wow.
After
very Jamie of you pulling that right up.
Already had it up. After reaching a 40-year record low for 2 consecutive years, 2020 and 2021, at 14 divorces per 1,000 married women, the divorce rate rose slightly in 2022 to 14.5 divorces per 1,000 married women.
What's the divorce rate in California? Let's try that.
Yeah. Let's look at that.
Oof.
This means that only us.
75 people out of 1,000 will be divorced in California. What's that chart to the right there?
California has a 60% divorce rate. Damn.
Yeah.
So yeah, above 50%. So this is having a trust is one way to ensure. Hopefully, you and your family don't have to deal with this, but it's one way to ensure that your children from a previous marriage are included in passing up those assets.